as always. Thank you, brother. Take care. All right, we're going to move this along back to the great state of Ohio. We'll talk about the customer experience, shaping the Buckeye experience. And here to lead this discussion is somebody we all know, Lenny Berry. Come on out, my friend. Let's give Lenny a round of applause. We all love Lenny. Look how cool he looks. You just look really cool, Lenny. I wish I could be as cool as you. Lenny, why don't you introduce your panel, brother? Come on out, my friends, and Lenny will bring you to the stage here. Flip the switch, just in case they turned them off. They were very diligent. And Chris, if you could just make sure we're good. Good on these mics.
Hello. Oh,
there we
hello.
go, there we go.
We are live. Yeah, it looks like it just takes a couple seconds for it to kick off.
As you can tell, I don't do this often. And I specifically had David sit on the end so I wouldn't look like a toddler up here. Well, our panel consists of Miss Emilie. We have Stacy, Alex, Mike, and of course, David. We're here to discuss how consumer protection and policy will define retail in Ohio. So I'd like to start off by letting the panel introduce themselves and a little bit about what they do.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Emilie. I'm the Vice President of Business and Governmental Affairs for BeneLeaves. We're a standalone processor located in Columbus, just right downtown. And yeah, I've been in the business for quite some time now. So as we all know in the business, it's like dog years, and yeah, it's been a long road, but happy to be up here. And I've known Lenny for a long time, too. You and I go way back, too.
Yeah, very
Since the beginning of the program here,
yes.
so
yes.
Got some OGs up here for sure.
Miss Stacy?
All right, good afternoon, folks. Stacy Litke, Vice President of Banking and Financial Services at Green Check Verified. We are a financial services ecosystem that supports the cannabis industry with banking, lending, payments, payroll, et cetera. So I'll chime in on those topics when it's appropriate.
My name is Alex Sandorf. I'm the lab director and CSO for Lighthouse Sciences. We are a standalone processor in Eastlake, Ohio. Like many of the other panelists here, been in the industry for a while. I've actually been doing this for 16 years. I've operated in 9 different states, but Ohio is by far my favorite. Honored to be up here and happy to share some insights from the unique challenges and perspectives we see as a standalone processor, and hopefully we can help educate on some of the changes coming in the program and what we can do to make things better for the future.
All right, Mike.
Sure. All right.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Mike Goral. I'm a partner at Verdant Strategies. I've been in the business about 10 years, started back in California, and then moved over to the East Coast during COVID. And, this industry is just constantly changing, and I think everyone here can learn from some of the mistakes that were made in the legacy states.
All right, David.
I'm David Belsky, the CEO and founder of FlowerHire. We do recruiting of management executive level professionals in the cannabis industry. We have clients across the country, 20 plus states this year, and so definitely a unique lens on the evolution of the workforce in cannabis that happens as markets mature. So happy to be here.
Thank you. So I was going to pick on a couple of people in the audience, but I don't see them anymore. So when it comes to brands entering to Ohio, Stacy specifically, we have Josh over here with Piehead Genius. Since Lighthouse is here, we had, Blue Planet, for example, came in as a brand. So how can you help those brands, I guess, get into the market, and what does your business provide for them?
Okay, that's a great question. So as a business is getting started in a new market, Green Check can help with finding a local financial institution to help them with their banking relationship. We've got a couple great ones here today that are in the Ohio market. We've got Right Pack Credit Union over here. They do banking and lending, and we just heard from Dan at Traditional Bank. They also do banking and lending. And so those institutions are part of our ecosystem. We can also help them get set up with payroll, with payments, so that they're compliant around their financial services. We can get them connected with capital sources. We have a number of folks in our ecosystem that will lend directly to the industry, whether it's a traditional financial institution like the couple that I just mentioned, or some of the alternative lenders that are more comfortable with startup operations. And we can also provide some guidance around what it looks like to be bankable. Transparency is key. We've heard it a few times today, and I'm sure we'll hear it from Mike as well, that having your financial information in order, having your compliance in order, understanding your market, all of those things come into play when you're working with a financial institution. So we can kind of help shape that up for you.
Yeah, from a policy perspective, that is, that's perfect. So Mike, we're creating a foundation for a brand, right, that's coming into the market so they can be transparent, be compliant. What can you offer from your side of things?
So one of the keys is you got to get your books in order, and you want to do that from the get-go, because if you're kind of being lax with your policies and procedures and how are you keeping track of your cash, you don't know if some of your money is going out the back door because people are stealing from you, and you just got to have this, really locked down, because if you don't, then these problems get worse and worse as time goes by. And what we've found is that companies that have good books and records, that have good management and stick to policies and procedures, then they're the ones that become successful, and then they get investors, interested in investing in their companies, because you need those numbers to be validated, because if you say, hey, I did $1 million in sales this month, that's great. But if you don't have a way of proving that you did that $1 million, then what investor is going to want to invest in you? And so, all this stuff about bookkeeping and taxes and things, they're not the fun part of this business, but it's essential, because if you don't have these fundamentals, then you won't be successful down the road.
So what are some of the roadblocks between you and Stacy that you're seeing, with the policy issues in a market like Ohio?
I think one of the things we've heard a few times today is that some of the policies that are in flux right now with Ohio are impacting the ability to advertise correctly, so that it impacts your ability to get those sales and get that revenue coming in. We've also heard about the impact of having these individual state markets and allowing states like Michigan to have a head start, to have a different point in their trajectory where they're at a consolidation price dropping situation, which is putting pressure on the Ohio operators as well. So understanding that those policy issues are impacting not only your ability to be successful, but also your ability to be banked when you're working with a lender who's looking at your probability of being successful, all of those things kind of come into play.
Anything to add, Mike?
Yeah, and I would add taxes to that too. I mean, over in Missouri, our clients there are just crushing it because they have a 6.5% flat tax. It's very easy to administer. And so, these taxes really become a big factor. In California, those companies out there are getting crushed by taxes. And, years ago, I was on a committee to help California formulate their tax structure. And I said, get everybody in with a low tax rate and then increase it if you don't generate enough revenue. And they told me, no, that's not how we do it here. We start with how much money we want to collect, and then we back into the tax rate to get there.
So once the financing is kind of, laid out for people, some of the things for consumer protection we never really talk about are people, right? So hiring the right people, making sure that they're in place and understand what compliance is and, how to operate. So can you touch on that for us, David?
Sure. The regulations in Ohio definitely affect a retail operator's ability to hire and retain people. Ambiguity, lack of clarity, changing landscapes, over-regulation, and a workforce that is well-trained and taken care of ends up having a better customer experience and obviously avoids compliance issues more at the point of retail. And I think that, I consider myself a champion of the career in cannabis, and retail is an entry point for most people that end up getting a career in cannabis. It's the most accessible job that's available. It's the most visible job that's available. The perception of what it means to work in cannabis is based on what somebody's experience is walking into a dispensary and talking to a bud tender more than anything else. And so we want to attract high quality talent to work in these retail stores. And cannabis gives the platform to doing so because of the purpose-driven nature of the work. So there's plenty of examples of people that are experienced professionals that are looking for a job in cannabis just because they're curious, and they end up going to work in a retail store as a bud tender part-time while they have another job going on. And there's plenty of examples of upward mobility in this industry. I can't tell you how many people start off as a bud tender that became a retail GM, even a vice president of retail that is running 30 plus retail stores that started off 12 years ago as a bud tender in Colorado. There's examples of that, and people that we've actually gotten jobs for. There's bud tenders that end up becoming heads of marketing or heads of compliance. So being able to have policy that promotes companies' ability to invest in their staff, invest in their leadership training within their stores, provides a much better consumer experience, and ultimately protects consumers by making sure they're interfacing with people that are going to handle things correctly at the point of sale.
So me and Zach were talking, earlier today, and he mentioned something about bud tenders, right? And we all know, wages are low in the industry. We get a high turnover. Somebody like King City just opened up a new dispensary, right? So how can you advise them, right, on how to maintain a consistent employment staff there, right, and try to lower the level of turnover, right? Because without that, now you have to reinvest in another employee and then another employee, right? So now the training changes. So how can you help them logistically deviate with that?
Well, the good thing is now in 2025, there's lots of examples of what the financial makeup of a retail store needs to look like, how to optimize your labor force, that you can actually pull from by talking to people that have either worked in finance or retail ops in this industry that have been very accountable to financial performance. So I think not over-hiring or under-hiring, but trying to get ahead of making sure you have the right people. I think that there's lots of examples of companies paying more than within $2 or $3 of minimum wage, actually attracting a higher quality person that treats the job more like a professional, which ends up contributing to the bottom line through a better retail experience for the customer and a better LTV for the customer. So obviously, you can't just overpay for somebody. I do think on the flip side of that, HR policy really does matter in this industry. There's a couple things where retail operators are responsible for training for any store employee to be able to come in and have training on compliance, training on inventory, and there's definitely been examples of operators that have had their delay their launch because they didn't have that in place. There's mandates for continuing education for retail employees that survive a couple years, and obviously we're just now getting to that 2-year mark, so I'm sure they're going to start checking to make sure employees are getting their continuing education credits required by the state mandates. And there's things like wage and hour law, like proximity workers, which are workers that have to go into a place physically to do their job. There's a huge demand for those folks in the gig economy. And so retail operators are offering tips, as they should, for their bud tenders, right? But there's been several six-figure judgments against operators in Ohio around improperly pooling tips and including the wrong people in the tip pool. So ultimately I think, really paying attention to, compliance-driven HR strategy, wage and hour law, also benefits operators' ability to not be penalized to be employers, but also be able to put capital to work in their store for their people.
So speaking of operators, we have Emilie and Alex. When it comes to employees, when you're hiring a staff, right, you're teaching them very rigorous things, things they got to have a lot of knowledge because they're making products for the consumer, right? When we're talking about transparency, potency, and trust, Emilie, first we'll start with you. How do you navigate who you bring on, right, and kind of what you show them, and hopefully they retain it and stay on with you to keep making great products?
Yeah, sure. And one thing I just want to touch on with what you were saying as well is that our industry is so amazing because it's such an awesome pathway of entry for so many different people, so many different walks of life, no college degree needed. I mean, you could walk in as a bud tender, to your point. I mean, I'm very passionate about it because we've seen it, just throughout the industry since day one.
Well, it's the American dream. It's like you can come in, get a job, work your way up from just work ethic, and have a career opportunity fast-tracked, starting at entry level, which is hard to find these days.
Absolutely, with health insurance and be able to put food on your table. I mean, especially with single parents and literally all walks of life. It's been such a beautiful thing. So I just wanted to touch on that. It's awesome. Additionally, too, with hiring, there's a lot of accountability that comes with this industry. I mean, as we all know, anyone who's been in the hiring position, that, listen, you have to pass background checks and, go through the motions of getting certified and badged in Ohio. There is a lot of, nuance, but it's necessary nuance because at the end of the day, we're dealing with medical patients and now adult use consumers here in Ohio. Having been in retail in my past life, I've seen firsthand, just being on the front lines of retail, having to, work with consumers and patients that, they're not feeling good, they want their medicine, you gotta have patience, and it's not just typical retail where I'm gonna date myself with working at Ann Taylor or some of a clothing retail store. Being a bud tender is really, really hard work, and I think that's also why in Ohio we really try to provide the bud tenders with as much just support and patience and knowledge as possible, and try to, have these bud tender appreciation events and stuff like that, because truly our bud tenders they're incredible people doing that work every day. But then additionally, even processing and cultivating, testing labs. Our industry that touches so many different aspects of the workforce. It's incredible, and our industry is it's awesome. It touches so many different areas.
Well, you mentioned testing labs. I see Everett here from ACT Labs. Mm-hmm. So when you're sending product, I don't know who you use, but making sure that you get the proper lineage, I should say, for the labels, right? Because that's the most important. So as a consumer, I'm coming to a dispensary. I want to know what's in it. Want to make sure it's safe for me. When you're manufacturing products, and you and I were talking about not only now, but for the future, right? So once we go federally legal, hopefully, right? How does that change the game for products that are made for us as consumers too?
Well, with any testing program, when we're designing and formulating products, we want as much data as we can have. We test a lot more than would actually be fully required in the program. We're looking to gather as much data as we can so we can do very intelligent product formulation, right? We keep extensive records. We do solvent-based marijuana ingredient tests on every product that's going to be used. We never just kind of throw a fly ball out there and hope we're going to get a good test result or a test result for potency we want. Particularly with infused products, things like edibles, whether that be infused chocolates or topicals, what we strive to create is a replicable experience, a consistent experience. If you purchase Lighthouse Sciences MJ Muscle and Joint Balm in June of 2022, and you pick one up in July of 2025, it's going to be the same product, plus or minus about 0.2% THC. very precise, very intelligent formulation, and very data-driven. We keep a lot of data, even additional testing that is not even on the testing panels, things we were able to work with some of our testing products to start gathering data on. Beyond just terpenes, we're looking for information on flavonoid and phenols, right? So we can start building a little bit of a genetic library and getting some information on the strains, and also working with the state to hopefully be able to add that to labels. But want to gather a lot of data. We want to make sure that the products we're producing are extremely consistent, right, to drive that repeatable experience for the consumer and the end user.
So, you know, we kind of touched on a little bit about federal legalization and a couple other panels. From each one of your perspective, like, how does that change the dynamic for the consumer at retail, right? So, of course, it's going to open up probably products for us in a different vein. So can you talk about that from a futuristic standpoint?
Sure. I think, you know, just as industries grow in generality, I think there's a lot of variability with product formulation and just the quality of products. I think, you know, especially for us as a processor, you know, we're always very consumer and patient focused, and I think a lot of our products are already coming from a medically based standpoint. But it's incredibly important as well that our facilities are built out to FDA regulation. You know, FDA is not in our business yet, but it will be, and that'll be another layer from that lens that'll kind of come down from, you know, the federal government. Our facility now is built out from FDA, is built out for FDA regulations since day one. That's something we just take tremendous pride in. But that is something I think just as manufacturers, if you're not already, it's something to definitely look into. For us as well, you know, we started off in a strictly medically based program. And so you're making products for medical patients, you know, and the variety of different you know, immunosensitive qualifications that so many patients had. I think for us, it was one of the major top of mind things we had when we were building on our facility, is just to make sure that everything is clean, you know, FDA safe. So I think that's definitely something that, you know, if you're producing manufactured goods, you should definitely look into making sure your facility is built out to FDA.
Yeah.
1,000% agree with everything you just said. I've actually talked about this for years. If you're a processor or a cultivator and you're not preparing now for GMP regulation and for FDA oversight for your operation, you are far, far behind the 8 ball on that one. We do all of our paperwork records up to GMP standards, keeping information the way that's very mandated out, needs to be done in certain ways, making sure the facility is up to, as you say, FDA standards and cleanliness levels. It's incredibly important to do that prep work now, to not be reactive, to be prepared for it, because when those regulations come into effect, when the government regulators start coming in, because we don't know what it's going to look like, right? There's a lot of rumblings about descheduling and is it going to do this, is it going to do that? We're all hoping for a better tax situation, I'm sure. You know, I'm sure we'd love to see the end of 280E, but, you know, ultimately, eventually we're going to fall under a much more stringent regulatory structure than what we currently see with the DCC. And I mean, I for one welcome it. We're prepared, we're ready for it. We've been putting the work in ahead of time, and we think it'll be very minimal disruption to our normal way of doing business and our normal operations, but you got to put that legwork in. And ultimately, it's like you said, it's about producing a higher quality product that is true medical grade, whether it's going out for adult use or to a medical consumer. You know, you need to make sure that what is coming out of your facility is safe. You're using verified and tested ingredients. You're doing product formulation that is consistent, and you're making sure that you're putting out something that you can put your name behind and that you stand behind.
So how would that affect your industries, Mike, David, and Stacy?
Well, I was just going to say that, like, if there is descheduling, then, you know, from a financial reporting standpoint, you're going to be so much better off. I mean, there's valuations out there that say that companies will be worth 3 times what they're worth now if there's descheduling, because now all of a sudden your cash flow is going to be so much better. You don't have to pay all these 280E taxes. That's going to get lenders more, you know, interested in lending to you because, hey, now you got this extra money that you didn't have before. And, you know, you can operate like a normal business. And so this industry is just, you know, just so tight, you know, in terms of the margins, that if you got rid of that now you're on equal playing field like other companies.
I'm going to be a little contrarian here. I don't think rescheduling is the panacea that a lot of folks think that it is. It's still a controlled substance. It still has to be dispensed through a regulatory process. And I think moving it to Schedule 3 is going to open up the door for Big Pharma to come in and do what they want to do with the industry, which to me ruins everything. I think the much better play would be descheduling it completely. Because rescheduling it, I mean, if you think about it, it's saying there's a medical use. So then what happens to the rec market? You know, are they under different rules? Do you now have to split up your expenses between medical products versus recreational products? And are recreational products still under 280E? Like, I think there's a lot of nuance there that needs to be worked out yet. But I will say from a financial services perspective, there are a lot of financial players, whether it's traditional banking or even some of the payment companies, that are kind of waiting for that change to get more comfortable working with the industry. So whether it's rescheduling or descheduling, I think it's going to open up the doors to more traditional financing, less expensive capital, less expensive bank accounts, because the risk will be down a little bit, but there's still going to be, as long as there's an illicit market, there's still a compliance component where the financial services system needs to make sure that the money coming in the door is from legal regulated sales and not from the illicit market. So I think there's still going to be some compliance overhead. I just think it goes down a bit.
Yeah, I think to your point, no one knows exactly what the impact will be of any type of rescheduling or descheduling in the time frame around that. But I do think this industry would benefit from a shot of exuberance and positivity, and you would see new capital flowing into the industry, and whether it's going in the right places or not, time would tell. But for my business specifically, I think it would, maybe you could deduct your expenses you pay towards recruiting services from your taxes like a normal business. That would be good for me. I would like that. So I think, you know, we could use any form of positivity, but how it impacts individual businesses, I think you just don't know how it plays out, because it's going to take years to determine that specifically, and it will probably be a state-by-state thing still, you know, because it's already out of the bag, and how do you put back into the bag what's already out of the bag?
So from the policy and protection perspective, what word of advice would you give not only the state regulators? Ohio's is a mess right now, right? We're trying to figure things out. We don't know if we're medical, we're legal, we're adult use with medical. I mean, I know they're trying to get it going, but from a protection standpoint, from a consumer side, what advice can you give Rome dispensaries or, like I said, King City, how can they operate in a responsible manner to give consumers great products?
I think it all comes down to education, which we know in Ohio can be a little bit difficult, especially as operators. We're under very strict regulation. We're hoping eventually we'll see that loosen up a little bit. We're continually trying to have that dialogue with our regulators, with the legislature. I just think it kind of goes back to the stigma that just collectively we're all continuing to battle, right? It started from day one. Every single one of us in this room, I'm sure we've all had a conversation at one point in our life, and fast forward to today, it's like, hey, we're a living, breathing industry. We deserve all of these things, and we deserve to have parity with all of these other industries. And so I think that's something that's just an ongoing, continuous conversation. As far as the general public, it's talk to as many people as you possibly can about cannabis. Tell them that it's an industry. There's safe places to buy safe, triple-tested product. There's dispensaries opening, it feels like every other day. Especially from the retail perspective, bud tenders are our key. They are our educators. We're telling the general public to write our legislators. We need the general public to to tell the DCC, hey, we need to still empower the medical program as well. Both programs have to exist. That way we can still serve and, provide these awesome products for the medical patients as well and be able to provide that education. So it's definitely twofold, but it's going to take all of us to continue this push and keep uplifting our industry.
I would just say focus on leadership development within your retail store. A lot of operators in Ohio, put people in the leadership roles that may be their first time in a leadership position. As we talked about before, this industry has upward mobility, and that's great. But don't just put them there and not support them with the proper training on not only management, but also everything else that goes into it to benefit the employee and then the customer experience in the store. So if you're thinking about like the most high impact thing that L&D departments and bigger cannabis companies do to affect the bottom line is leadership development, period. So that would be the starting point that I would say to benefit the retail and the customer experience.
Alex.
A lot of the questions we see are related to compliance and how can we make this program better. And one of the things I was talking to you about is what can we change? How can we make the program better? And I was thinking, actually, a lot of the time I'm up here, I'm thinking about what is one of the rules we can change or what's one of the new regulations we could push for a change on. But what I think we need to do to help Ohio succeed and to improve the experience for the end user, for the consumer, and for the operators, honestly, is kind of changing the relationship with the Division of Cannabis Control. I've operated in 9 states now, and Ohio is unfortunately one of the most adversarial programs I've ever operated with. And I'm not sure why. It feels a lot of times like the Division of Cannabis Control is more interested in catching people out rather than weeding out bad faith operators from good faith operators. And in my experience in this state, I've know a lot of folks out here. I know a lot of operators out here. There's some fantastic brands. There's some fantastic cultivators. There's some fantastic processors. By and large, what I've seen is most everyone out here is a truly good faith operator. They are trying to stay compliant. They are trying to follow the rules. But we have a very odd relationship with the Division of Cannabis Control, with the regulatory bodies. And I think it's important to start working on changing that relationship, changing that conversation with the state, helping open up chains of communication, channels of communication with the DCC, getting some more transparency, getting some more feedback and buy-in from the licensees, from the stakeholders, to make regulation that makes sense, to implement rules that make sense, and to help the program be competitive with the neighboring programs. If we don't do that, we're just going to keep limping along while Michigan eats our lunch, while other neighbors get their programs set up and established, because it feels like we're being held back. And I understand the hesitancy. I understand the resistance to allowing Ohio just to go wild the way you might see a rec program like Colorado or California or Nevada, where it's, kind of wild. You got billboards everywhere. People are smoking in public. I understand the resistance to that. And we're not saying go crazy, but man, it needs to change the conversation. We need to see a more collaborative working environment with our regulatory bodies to help the people that are honestly trying to follow the rules succeed and grow. And there's a lot of ways that can be achieved, but I think that's a big start. And it's kind of an ongoing conversation with the DCC, but I think that would be a very positive step in the right direction.
Stacy?
What was the question? Was that the one rule question?
Yes, just
Okay.
giving them your advice.
I personally would love to just see cannabis descheduled completely. It's a plant. I think, where you guys are going with FDA oversight, USDA oversight, it should be in the same bucket as carrots. I mean, there's about as much harm from carrots as there is from cannabis. So that would allow for that interstate commerce. That would allow for some leveling out between the states. I do worry a little bit about the folks that are surviving because they're in a state market and they don't have to compete with Humboldt County, So I think that would change some things about the market. But to your point about letting people run loose, we saw in Oklahoma where they had at some point like 12,000, 15,000 licenses, and they've pulled back on that. In my home state in Massachusetts, they're putting together a ballot referendum to undo adult use, and so is Maine. And what happens if that goes through? What does that do to the people that are employed in the industry? So, the things that they're concerned about, you want to avoid setting that up in the Ohio market. And one of the things is smoking outdoors. The people in Massachusetts are like, everywhere I go, it smells like weed, and it's so irritating. And it's, so you're right, the conversation has to happen at that state level. But overall, I just love to see it be scheduled.
Mike?
I think that hemp and hemp-derived beverages are what Gen X and Gen Z are consuming more than alcohol these days. And I see that as a real threat to this industry because, there shouldn't be two sets of rules where if I say I derived my product from hemp, I don't have to go through any of the testing, the regulatory issues. I just, put it out there and find a distributor and I'm off to the races. And that's just not fair for all of you that have, spent so much time and money and effort to get your license, be compliant, do all of this, taxes and the restrictions that are imposed on you. It just needs to be a level playing field.
Well, we have about 3 minutes. So expansion to and access to the medicine, I think is another key aspect, right? So as this market grows, more dispensaries open up, especially in the rural areas, for patients. Can you talk a little bit about that before we get off? Like, how is that positively affecting the industry as we expand?
Yeah, I think it just kind of touches on the point of parity, right? So we see kind of like the hemp market, and then, we have like our regulated industry under the DCC, and I think that's where the word parity comes to mind, because we would love to be able to advertise and market where these dispensaries are opening. I started off in retail. I opened the first dispensary in Central Ohio. The very first day, we had a lineup of media, and it was all natural, organic, earned PR. Day one, everyone knew where we were located, and every dispensary since then, within that first year, got all that earned media. And now for all these new retail spaces that are opening up, it's been a little unfortunate to see, because they're opening up in areas that so desperately need a dispensary and so desperately need a safe place to go and purchase medicine. For a long time in the program, patients were driving hours to get their medicine because the closest dispensary was like 2 hours away, which is how spread out Ohio can be. And so I think, that's an amazing thing. I think as an industry, we try to get the word out as much as possible. But it is something I think that I personally would like to see change, as far as just being able to put the dispensary up on the marquee. If you're in a plaza, like, here's a dispensary name. Hey, we're right here. Come shop. And that's just the kind of parity we need in our industry, with all due respect to, the good hemp players. And, personally, I know a lot of people that are in the hemp space that do an amazing job. But I think there's a lot of iffy players also that are toying around in gray areas, and they're not providing safe product, but they're able to market, and they're able to do a lot of things that in a regulated industry that we just are not allowed to. So I think just having that parity is incredibly important. And I just think every time a dispensary opens up, we need to be cheering each other on, sharing to social media, LinkedIn, telling your friends and family, hey, this is where this new dispensary is, because they need all the support that they can get right now.
Also, being able to put actual strain names on products too, right? You have to make things up.
What do you mean? You don't like having to make up random names that have nothing to do with anything,
right.
that nobody knows what it is?
It's like regulating a cherry tomato different than an heirloom tomato, right? I mean, it's the same plant.
I will say one thing on the whole hemp side of things. While I absolutely agree with you, it's not fair to the operators, the people that acquired licenses and went through the process and followed the rules, to have to now be competing with product being sold for a fraction of the price at CVS. There is a positive note to it. It has been a monumental shift to the public perception of cannabis because cannabis products, let's just be honest about it. Hemp, it's not hemp, it's cannabis. Cannabis products are now more widely available than they have ever been in the history of our country since we started Prohibition. You can walk, I mean, literally from here, if I go 15 minutes in any direction, I can find 3, 4, 5 vape stores, liquor stores. Target is now selling hemp-derived THC seltzers. They just announced that. They're going to be starting that the next month. It has made cannabis so widely available and accessible to the market. It has driven a paradigm shift. The alcohol industry is terrified of what the cannabis industry is going to become. They are seeing falling sales, falling profits, and it has changed the perception of cannabis. It is not this scary, druggy thing. It's just what you do after a long day of work. You come home, you have a seltzer, you eat a gummy, or you smoke a joint, and you chill out and you relax, and it's not dangerous. It's, I think, been beneficial for the industry as a whole, but I definitely agree we need to regulate it and control it before we have problems.
I agree. Well, as the panel showed you, it's going to take all of us, right, as a collective to make it a safe program, make it beneficial for the patients and for the operators too. So that's our time. Thank you so much.
Great job. Give it up for our panel. Thank you, Lenny. Thank you, panel. Wonderful, wonderful job. Really appreciate it. My friends, one more panel left on the day. Thank you very much. I really love that you wore a tie for me, buddy. Thank you very much for that.